which published an article last month linking him to lewd and offensive comments made years ago on a pornography website. Robinson said at a news conference in Raleigh, North Carolina, that he had not made the comments that the CNN report attributed to him. And the embattled music mogul Sean Combs is facing 6 more sexual assault lawsuits in New York, including one from a man who accused Combs of groping his genitals when he was 16 years old. Now, the lawyers who filed that lawsuit said this is the first filings from dozens of plaintiffs. The lawsuit filed in the federal district court in Manhattan also accused Combs of raping 2 men and 2 women and forcing another man to perform oral sex. The frame for these allegations is from 1995 to 2021. And multiple Republican lawyers in Arizona say they and others who were involved in the party's election litigation efforts in past cycles are keeping their distance this time around, in large part because of Senate candidate Kari Lake's history of spurious fraud claims. Earlier this month, one of the key chief legal counsel for President or former President Trump and the RNC election integrity operation in Arizona resigned. He is now among more than a dozen Republican lawyers in the state who were part of the GOP's Arizona litigation team in past election cycles who are slated to not be involved this fall. And a young voter advocacy group backing VP Harris is launching a campaign on TikTok meant to target young voters, but not necessarily those backing former President Trump. Voters of Tomorrow released a series of videos today aimed at convincing young supporters of Green Party candidate Jill Stein to back Harris, working to rebrand the third party nominee as a scammer. This is the news of the day, and this is Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. This is your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. In this hour, I'm joined by Dr. Larry Walker, professor at the University of Central Florida, and Professor Calvin John Smiley, who is the author of Defund: Conversations Towards Abolition. And in hour two, I'm going to be talking to 2 local leaders in Las Vegas, where I happen to be live from today. I'm talking to the congressman from Las Vegas, from Nevada, Stephen Horsford. He is also the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus and also an entrepreneur and business owner, Marcus Allen. Having these 2 leaders on today because I'm actually in Vegas doing voter engagement, and tomorrow night I will be live from Marcus Allen's barbershop. So Marcus Allen is a successful entrepreneur. He owns a barber school. He owns 4 barber shops. And with all this talk about the black male vote, it just felt right on my 7-state battleground tour, in this state in particular, the state of Nevada, to go to where people are. And black men spend a whole lot of time at black barbershops. So I'm going to be sitting in a barber chair, talking to barber students, talking to clients, talking to Marcus Allen about what is top of the mind for voters in this important swing state. I also went out today and knocked some doors, so I have some idea about what folks are thinking. So make sure you stick around for hour two. There are about 7 states that are going to decide this election, and Nevada happens to be one of them. So you want to make sure you're plugged in to what is happening in Nevada. But before I bring on my guests, here's what I'm thinking in real time. Jill Stein, you all know her. She is a 73-year-old physician. She is an environmental activist. She is running as a third party candidate for president of the United States. She's a member of the Green Party. Jill Stein ran before, I should say, in 2012 and 2016. She announced her 2024 run in November of 2023. Now, you just heard me say that there are some young voters who are going to be up on TikTok trying to tell other young people that Jill Stein is a scammer, that she's not the environmental activist and the liberal candidate, the left leaning candidate that they believe her to be. Many people believe that it is because of Jill Stein and the way she pulled votes from Hillary Clinton in 2016 that Donald Trump was elected president. And that, again, in this election cycle, she has the ability to pull votes from Kamala Harris and perhaps give a victory to Donald Trump. Now, she says that's not her intention, but we know the way the math works that at the margins, if Jill Stein is successful in pulling votes in key battleground states where she's been campaigning heavily, she indeed could be the spoiler that helps Donald Trump get elected. Well, a couple of things have happened that bring more attention to Jill Stein. One, today, Ku Klux Klan leader David Duke endorsed her over Donald Trump. Now, as you all know, David Duke is a proud anti Semitic white supremacist. He did endorse Trump in 2016 and 2020. But this time around, he says he's thinking about what's best for white people and Europeans. And he said that Jill Stein is one of the most important statements that he has made ever politically. He makes the baseless claims that global Jewish conspiracy called the greatest threat to us all and to all mankind are things that we all need to be worried about. So we know David Duke is a fringe candidate, and Jill Stein has quickly disavowed his endorsement, saying she does not want to be associated with him. But the other reason Jill Stein is top of the mind for me is last night at a packed house in Tempe, Arizona. I was in Arizona, my first stop on my battleground tour. We had a very insightful, respectful, but spirited conversation with some local leaders from Phoenix and Tempe. And we had a question and answer period. And a young man, black man, said he was an immigrant to this country, but had become a citizen, said he was voting for Jill Stein, said he disagreed with so much of what the panel had said for, 90 minutes before he got up to speak. And most of what the panel had said was all the reasons why folks were voting for Kamala Harris and not Donald Trump. Now, he said he was voting for Jill Stein because of the war in Gaza, because Kamala Harris, in his opinion, had not done enough to support the families that have experienced the horrific losses in Palestine, and that it was a protest vote. And he couldn't worry about whether it would help Donald Trump or not. He needed the Democratic Party to recognize that they needed to take a different position on the war. And he said a lot of black young men that he knew were voting for Jill Stein. Well, the DNC obviously has heard young men like this guy in Tempe, Arizona last night, because there are now ads targeting Jill Stein. Not just the TikTok ads that we talked about, but other ads from the DNC, from the Harris Walz campaign. Jill Stein is clearly a threat to Kamala Harris's success. And anyone that is so naive to think that a protest vote for Jill Stein will get you anything other than a Donald Trump presidency, you are sadly and sorely mistaken. And I listened to the young man last night, tried to give him some education about what Kamala Harris could and could not do as vice president, and even what she could and could not do as president as it relates to the war in Gaza. I think he was listening. I'm not so sure he agreed with me and some of the other panelists that tried to address the issue. So we got an issue. We have an issue amongst young people. We knew we've had this issue. We know a lot of young people, how they feel about the war. We know that they are blaming uh, Biden and Harris for that war, even though that's not is not our war, and Harris and Biden do not have magical powers and cannot make Netanyahu change direction with respect to this war. But it's something we need to be mindful of, and it's something we are going to have to address and find ways to talk to young voters like the one last night and others who have decided that Jill Stein is the candidate. I told this young man, I said, look, Jill Stein cannot win. There is one candidate that's going to be the president. It is Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. And when you vote for Jill Stein, you are essentially voting, we know, probably for Donald Trump. Again, I don't think it resonated with this young man, but I want to find some more ways, and hopefully my experts today, my contributors can help me as I host my event tomorrow. I'm sure I'm going to get this question again, and I want to be prepared because it bothers me that we may lose this election the way we did in 2016 for someone like Jill Stein, who has zero chances of getting anywhere near the White House. When we come forward, more of today's trending and breaking news right here on KBLA Talk 1580. Stay with us.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580. Tabitha Smiley's new book, The Covenant with Black America, 20 Years Later, is now on sale everywhere. This classic text shot to #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list almost 2 decades ago. If you have the original book, you will surely want to get this 20th anniversary edition with powerful new contributions from today's leading voices. This 20th anniversary edition presents a compelling blend of historical insights and contemporary urgency in this critical and unprecedented election year. Get your copy of The Covenant with Black America, 20 Years Later, today.
That morning chill means truck season.
5 more minutes.
No snoozing. Do it all in a Chevy Colorado or Silverado, including the class-leading range of the Silverado EV.
Talking to me?
Work, play, hauling, off-roading, a Chevy truck can take it all.
Okay, I'm up.
It's Chevy Truck Season. Get 0% financing on all 2024 Silverado 1500 pickups when you finance with GM Financial. Chevrolet, together, let's drive.
0% APR for 36 months. Monthly payment is $27.78 for every $1,000 you finance. Example down payment 9.3%. Must finance with GM Financial. Some customers may not qualify. Not available with lease and some other offers. Take new retail delivery by 10/31/24.
We're thrilled to announce that the Dear Future Wifey podcast is now available on the Urban One Podcast Network. This show, hosted by Latiris R. Whitfield, explores the journey of discovering and rediscovering love and relationships. With over 500,000 subscribers on YouTube, Dear Future Wifey has become a prototype for discussions about love and relationships. Learn how to rediscover love, heal, and have faith in relationships. Go to urbanonepodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Girl, I have a secret. When I get stressed out, I get sweaty. That's why I use Secret Clinical Antiperspirant. It's like my own secret weapon. For 72 hours, I get Secret's strongest protection against sweat caused by stress, heat, and activity, because you know how crazy life can get. Plus, it's made with advanced odor fighters that don't just cover up smelliness. They help prevent it from happening in the first place. Believe me, if I weren't wearing Secret, I'd be a hot, smelly mess. Thankfully, Secret works.
You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580, where climate is king. Climate is king. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. LA County's new Justice Care and Opportunities Department, or JCOD, is here to support justice-involved individuals and their families. The JCOD Support Center is now taking calls at 1-833-LACJCOD. That's 1-833-522-5263. Available 7 days a week from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m., the Support Center is your one-stop shop for re-entry issues and court support. They offer court reminders, connections to local services, transportation assistance for housing, court appearances, and childcare. The JCOD hotline provides personalized help to connect you with services that you need. And don't forget to check out justiceconnect.org for more information. Remember, it's free and available every day at 1-833-522-5263. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
We are back, and John Calvin Smiley and Professor Larry Walker are joining me in this hour. In hour two, we're going to be talking to the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus and a successful entrepreneur who has 4 barber salons, or barber shops, we should call them, in Las Vegas, Nevada. Nevada is a key swing state. I'm actually broadcasting live from Las Vegas, Nevada, as a part of my 7-state battleground tour. I've been out talking to voters today. I'll be back out tomorrow talking to voters. I was in Phoenix, Arizona, Tempe, Arizona for the last 2 days, also engaging with voters and listening to what folks are saying. And one of the things that a young voter said to me last night at one of my voter engagement events, Professor Walker, was that he was voting for Jill Stein. Said that that was a protest vote. He knew that she would not be the president of the United States, but he said Democrats needed to change their policies on the war in Gaza, and this was his way of sending that message. This is very dangerous, and the DNC and the Harris Walz team knows it because they are now running ads, which is unusual to do against a third-party candidate like Jill Stein. This is her 3rd run for president, and she's never going to be president, but she's a threat. And I'm looking for some help from you guys about, what do I say to young people? Because I don't think I got through to that young man last night as much as, me and some of the other panelists that I had with me tried to convince him of the errors of his ways.
Yeah, Areva, there's a lot of, opinions regarding this election, which is normal, but I think there's even more anxiety, and certainly particularly racial ethnic communities, because of the threat of another Trump presidency. So when it comes to this particular young brother you described, I think the one thing that we can't really fix right now, and I'm not saying he's an example, but is misinformation. That's a long-term issue. As a researcher, as a black man, I've been talking to a lot of folks about this. We're going to have to figure out how we communicate with black men and the information they get, political information they get relating to misinformation. That's the first thing. The second thing, I think one of the things when you talk to people, particularly black folks or Latinx folks or anyone also from racial ethnic backgrounds, is the threat that Donald Trump, possesses in terms of black and other communities is he wants to give complete immunity to police officers. As a black man, as an uncle, and as a father of a college age black male, that alone by itself is a no go for me. Also, Areva, the clear thing is about listen, a protest vote for Jill Stein who got 1% of the vote and is never. First of all, Jill Stein is not even qualified to be president of the United States. She doesn't have the qualifications. But if you're going to vote for Jill Stein, you may find yourself under a new authoritarian regime here in the United States. He has a complete blanket from the U.S. Supreme Court to do whatever he wants to do. He has been clear about having camps and using the U.S. military. And we know he's talking about black communities, Baltimore, D.C., etc., when he talks about using, various authorities to deal with individuals. He's talking about black and brown communities. So he doesn't want to mess around and find out, because this is not a game. And we're talking about the United States hanging on a razor's edge.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Professor Smiley, tomorrow our whole show is going to be dedicated to the Kamala Harris Economic Opportunity Plan that she presented yesterday, targeting black men, $1,020,000 forgivable loans, a focus on health equity, focus on apprenticeships, focus on jobs, more black educators. We're going to do a whole deep dive on that. But I did want to ask you about this. Another young man in Tempe, Arizona last night said he was an entrepreneur and said he was probably voting for Harrison Walls, but he said he didn't like the talk around black men and kind of the Magic Johnson, Barack Obama, kind of chiding that they've done, and that this notion that black men, quote unquote, must vote Democratic without challenging or questioning. So there's some kind of narrative that's been disseminated, I don't know, to the fraternity, that people are talking to black men and telling them they can't challenge the Democrats, and they don't like it. I mean, he was in a much more polite way, stating that he did not appreciate people saying black men had to vote Democratic, and because Kamala Harris is black, they had to vote for her. And he didn't appreciate Obama saying that they should not vote for Donald Trump, even though he did say he was going to vote for Harris. So, is there a memo that went out to black men, telling them that y'all sick and tired and it's time to stand up and be heard or something?
No, I don't think it's that. I think that there is certainly a level of being chastised if you question the Democrats that certainly have come from the top down, right? If we remember during the 2020 campaign when Joe Biden was on the Breakfast Club with Charlemagne, and he made that off-color comment that if you don't vote for Joe Biden, you ain't black. And so that's kind of been repeated through the last 4 years. So I think that, there are certainly folks who don't want to feel like they're being pandered to. I love that you're going into the deep dive. One of the things that I saw was about that they're going to help black men invest in crypto. And I'm like, yeah, but are we like 4 years too late in the crypto world? Like, you don't even hear about crypto anymore, but now that's going to be a platform. So I don't know if there's just people feeling like a little too late around that. But certainly there's folks who feel that if you have any criticism or any kind of critique of the Harris Walls ticket, then you're automatically going to be chastised as not black. And I think you get it from both sides of it, right? You're either not black enough because you didn't vote for Walls or Harris, or you're only voting for Walls and Harrison Halls because you're black. So, there's this certain tightrope that I think black men or people of color in general have to walk when it comes to elections where there's a candidate of color that isn't challenged in the same way when there's white candidates and white folks just vote for people because of the color of their skin.
Well, and I hear you, and I'm grappling myself as a black woman with how to deal with this, out on my campaign tour, because quite frankly, I'm frustrated by it because the flip side of that is black people expecting when you have a black candidate like Barack Obama or Kamala Harris that they are going to get something, out of it, or they're going to be targeted, or there's going to be some special programs just for black people because the candidate is black. So it's not really fair for black men to say, well, we don't have to vote for black people just because they're black and we're black. But then you can't also turn around and say they ain't done nothing for me because I'm black and they're black. And then the question I also grapple with is I've not seen a single solitary plan. Yes, crypto may be pandering, but where are the plans from Jill Stein? Where are the plans from Donald Trump? Even trying to go into these communities and listen and understand what may be plaguing black men and doing something about it. So Kamala Harris may not be getting it 100% right, but I don't, the congressman from Florida went and had a barbershop. We heard about that back in August. We talked about it. And the black men in that barbershop, I think they were in Atlanta, basically told them, pack your bags and get out of here with this. We ain't buying what you're selling. And there's a leader of a black pack in Georgia, before he endorsed Kamala Harris, he says he represents 50,000 black men. He said he tried to get a meeting with Donald Trump. He said, went through all these channels, and the best they could offer him was a 5-minute photo opportunity. So I hear black men on one hand, but I'm still trying to understand, Professor Walker, are they just kind of buying into this grievance, whining culture? And I'm, I need y'all help because I'm about to go meet with some black men in the barbershop. I'm trying not to let the angry black woman come out of me and man up. We ain't got time for all this whining. But okay, tell me what I need to say.
Yeah, so let me know that Dr. Smiley and I were both right about how systems negatively impact Black people, right? And as Black men, we are actively engaged in our community from multiple lenses, right? Areva, Black men have a right to raise concerns when it comes to this election or previous elections, just any other constituency. I also highlight that I think there's a difference between what's online, the political class. We can include ourselves, and I'll include myself in that. And then what other Black folks, I'm from Philadelphia, what brothers in the community care about. I think a lot of times what happens in the political class and then what you see on social media is not really the reality. Look, statistically, we know the majority of Black men are going to vote for VP Harris. I also want to tell you, as relating to this polls, I'm getting a lot of text messages from folks. I do not, traditionally, these pollsters, unless it's Black centric, do a terrible job of polling Black folks. So this idea that Donald Trump is going to get 15 to 20% is not consistent with U.S. history, and it's not going to happen. Look, he'll probably cap at about 12%, and then in exit polls, and then when it happens, you won't hear some of the larger outlets apologize for the frenzy that they call leading up to this. But listen, brothers have a right to raise their voice. But let's be clear, the Biden-Harris administration, it's not perfect, and I know Dr. Smiley and I agree, there's some international issues that they could have done a better job with. But they have an excellent domestic policies, and those policies, while they don't say it, have been designed to close the racial wealth gap. And her housing policy is a continuation in that. And that's how I kind of see things from a policy perspective.
All right, we're going to keep this conversation going because I'm still grappling with my talking points. So I need y'all to help me out.
Okay.
Because I understand the right to challenge. Yes, everybody, women too. We should be challenging, and we are challenging. But it feels like we've gone beyond challenging to this kind of Donald Trump grievance culture. We're going to talk more about this when we come forward. KBLA Talk 1580. Stay with us.
I'm Amber Payton with 4 things you should know from BIN News. Keke Palmer has been named the first chief brand officer for Cream of Nature, a hair care brand owned by Revlon. With a personal connection to the brand, she will help shape its communication strategy and appeal to a new generation of consumers. Black Cobb County, Georgia Sheriff Craig Owens is under fire for calling deputies to a Burger King dispute over his wife's order. After being denied a refund for an item containing an allergen, Owens expressed regret for his actions, saying, quote, "I probably should have just driven off," end quote. His opponent, Dave Cavender, criticized him for abusing his power and diverting deputies from their duties. Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff will be in Georgia this week. He'll be speaking at a Harris campaign event in Savannah on Thursday. Emhoff plans to encourage voters to vote early for Vice President Harris. The Mall of Georgia is celebrating a milestone anniversary this week. It marks the 25th anniversary since the location opened. The mall will have special vendors, music, and family activities on Thursday night. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 at BINnews.com.
Accident in Lincoln Heights remains on the right shoulder of the 5 North before Main Street. Stop delays continue from the 10. Continue to drive carefully on the 10 East before La Brea Avenue in Mid-City, as an accident remains on the right shoulder, and a 40-minute backup still runs heavy from Lincoln Boulevard. Irvine's traffic is over 25 minutes on the 5 North between Sand Canyon Avenue and Ball Road. Also, Anaheim's 57 South between the 91 Riverside Freeway and Chapman Avenue is starting to get busy. A 40-minute backup in Hollywood continues to run heavy on the 101 South between Gower Street and Mission Road. And if you're in the city of Whittier on the 605 South before Rose Hills Road, watch for an accident on the right shoulder.
Got issues with youth or high school sports? Positive Coaching Alliance can help. PCA, a national nonprofit, offers more than 1,000 free online resources for youth and high school sports coaches, parents, students, and administrators. Visit PCADevZone.org.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
A 1-5 start for UCLA's football team prompted UCLA Athletic Director Martin Jamon to express support for first-year coach Deshaun Foster. UCLA supporters and boosters have expressed concerns to Jamon about the slow start and direction of the program. Foster was given a 5-year contract when he was hired in February, a deal that pays him $3 million a year. Jamon is asking UCLA Nation for patience. The Bruins have lost 5 straight and are 0-4 in the Big Ten. Next game for the Bruins is at Rutgers on Saturday. The Lakers are back on the court tonight. They're in Vegas for a preseason game against Golden State. 7 p.m. tip-off on NBA TV. After Week 6 in the NFL, 4 of the league's 6 black head coaches are above 500. Houston's D'Amico Ryan is 5-1. Pittsburgh's Mike Tomlin, Tampa Bay's Todd Bowles, and Atlanta's Raheem Morris are 4-2. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader. KBLA Talk 1580. Follow the leader. If you're not following KBLA Talk 1580 on all of our socials, then you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the web at KBLA 1580. That's right. Again, you can find all of our socials at KBLA 1580. We've got a lot to talk about. By the way, if you miss any of our weekday shows in real time, you can always catch up by checking out the podcast of your favorite shows at your leisure. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black. Got your black. Following the leader. Oh my God. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Asthma Peak Week is almost here, September 15th through 21st, and it's time to pay attention. Peak Week is a critical time of the year for asthma flare-ups and can lead to hospitalization. Did you know that Black Americans are approximately 5 times more likely than white Americans to be hospitalized for asthma? Stay aware, have a plan, and spread the word on Asthma Peak Week. For more active asthma care tips, visit luma-edu.com. This message is brought to you by Amgen and AstraZeneca.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. If you need help getting your resume in order, finding job training, or landing a job, we've got 3 great options for you. First, the City of Los Angeles has WorkSource centers across the area offering free job support. The California Workforce Development Board can help you with everything from GED prep to vocational training at no cost to you. On the federal level, the Department of Labor's American Job Centers offer a full range of services for job seekers and businesses alike. Visit careeronestop.org, or for more info, just call California's Help Center or visit cwdb.ca.gov or call 916-657-1440. For the City of Los Angeles programs, go to ewd.lacity.gov or call 213-744-7300. All these services are free to help you get your next job. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio that's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
We are back, and John Calvin Smiley and Professor Larry Walker join me in this hour. And in hour two, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, who happens to be the congressman from the 4th Congressional District of Nevada, Stephen Horsford, is going to join me. And a very successful entrepreneur right here in Las Vegas, Marcus Allen. He happens to own 4 barbershops and a barber school. I'm going to be visiting his barber school tomorrow in conversation with Black men as I crisscross the country on a 7-state battleground tour. And Calvin, John Smiley, and Larry Walker are helping me better understand how, in this moment where Black men are the center of attention in a lot of ways in this political cycle, how to understand what they are feeling and how to respond to some of their concerns. And I want to go back to something you said, Professor Smiley, about when Joe Biden said you're not Black if don't vote for him or you're not voting for the Democrats. I can understand on one hand how that could have been taken as an offhand, or as an offensive remark. But on the other hand, I think for a lot of people, they feel that way because Donald Trump in particular is a white supremacist, and he never ever misses an opportunity to show us that. Like the comments he recently made about Detroit and other urban cities, and the way that he has treated Black people historically. Literally last night at this event I was at in Tempe, a medical doctor, very prominent Black doctor in Phoenix, told me that he was amongst a group of Black men almost 20 years ago who were working on some project that involved financing Black businesses, and they were meeting with these wealthy financier type folks, and Donald Trump was one of them. And he said in that meeting, Donald Trump was making comments like, you people want handouts. He said it was the most offensive conversation with a white man sitting with a group of very successful Black men, mind you, and still to their face making these kinds of comments. So I think when Joe Biden and others make these statements, what they're responding to is, how can anyone that's African American support Donald Trump, who, any given day looks a whole lot like David Duke? Uh, I think that's perhaps some of the frustration you see online, pushback from Black women. Even a Black guy yesterday says, are Black men so fragile that they needed a whole policy rolled out for them the moment a Black woman is at the top of the ticket, having demanded holding back their votes when white people were at the top of the ticket? So I don't know. I'm just trying to get this right. I need to be out there talking to Black men, helping get them to the polls, not repelling them, Dr. Walker. So I'm coming with my hat in hand, seeking advice from the two of you.
So I guess I'll just start with that. Well, one, yes, we've all known that Donald Trump is a racist. We've known this for 40 years, going all the way back to the New York Times ads that he took out for the Central Park Five, and all of those things. But I think the larger concern, and if we're thinking about this as a philosophical exercise, is that we live in a democracy. So no one is owed our vote. And so voting third party or voting for someone else is not a vote for Donald Trump. It's a vote for the person that you think aligns best with your own values and interests and agenda. Now, in the kind of pragmatic real world that we live in, where we have this kind of very strict binary two-party system, it becomes a little bit more muddled. But I don't think that people are holding out their vote for Harris to give, or at least Black men to give us more things, or otherwise we're going to go for Donald Trump. I think it's that, Black men, Black women, people of color, marginalized communities across the country want to see in a candidate what best represents them. And I think in some of these cases, what we're seeing internationally, or this kind of aligning with aligning with the Republicans of the 2000s, isn't necessarily the slam dunk that we want to see. In my mind, George W. Bush is a war criminal. Dick Cheney is a war criminal. These are men who should be in The Hague, right? So, the Democrats rolling out, oh, we've got an endorsement from Dick Cheney, doesn't make me go, you know what? That is my interests aligned, because those are people who are also responsible for the deaths of brown people, the deaths of Black people, the not engaging with the issues. So I think I don't want to put the blame on Black men. I want to put the blame, or not even the blame, I want to put the onus, the burden on the Democratic Party as a party that should be out there saying, okay, Black men, we're not seeing Black men waving the banner in the same way. What do we need to do to get them on board? And it can't be, well, then that's a vote for Donald Trump. And so that would be.
But I don't think that's fair, Dr. Smiley. That's not fair. That is not what the Democratic Party has been doing. The Democratic Party, Kamala Harris, let's be clear about what she's been doing. Even before she was at the top of the ticket, she was convening groups of Black men a year ago to her residents, her official residents, listening to them, getting their feedback, going to HBCUs. She was doing the work to try to address the concerns, recognizing, you start talking about these geopolitical issues, they're complex. And she is and was a year ago the vice president. So her ability to even control some of these issues, some of this is just lack of education that people have. Like, she didn't have a magic wand as the vice president. And, I don't think that's fair.
Well, of course not, and that's why I was very clear in saying that it's the burden on the Democratic Party, not the burden on Vice President Harris, to change that narrative. And we know that the DNC is a lot bigger than her and Walz, and so where is the party that is going to, try to bring folks back into the fold? But once again, I'm not convinced that voting for third party is a wasted vote. I think it's an exercise in democracy.
All right. No, you're entitled to that. I'm a pragmatist. I have a lot of theoretical and philosophical, I shouldn't say theoretical, but philosophical ways that I feel about things. But at the end of the day, I recognize that we are in money in politics. Like, on one hand, I'm glad Kamala Harris raised $1 billion. But on the other hand, why should it take $1 billion to run for president? But I'm fundraising to help add to that $1 billion, because that is the reality in which we live in. So there are those things that, are aspirational things, right? The way we wish things were. And then it's the reality of where we are in this moment. And that's what I'm trying to, speak to, Professor Walker, young Black men who in this moment, are wanting to and have every right to vote how they feel philosophically on any issue. And if it happens to be a single issue like the war in Gaza, they have a right to that. For real, they do. But to your point, are they going to be okay when they wake up and Donald Trump is the president? He's immune from any kind of prosecution. He's going to make police officers immune. And are they connecting the dots? Do they recognize that that their vote is going to perhaps lead to his election and the things that he will do that will make their lives so much worse?
Yeah, I don't want Black folks to live in a new nadir, right? None of us want that. And I think it, listen, Dr. Smiley and read the conversation. I think this is what his democracy is, right? We engage in these different opinions and talk about it. But I think, and also I could describe myself as a pragmatic progressive. And the reason why I describe myself as that in that way is that, I've talked before, I spent 5.5 years working on Capitol and working with Republicans on a number of different ways. And I know that the last with reversal of Roe v. Wade and some of these other issues that you see in Project 25, I know for a fact that they could have never, when I worked on Hill, they could have never hoped to be on the cusp of really implementing some of the policies that will make our lives absolutely miserable. And the last thing that I want to see is if Donald Trump wins, and specifically as Black, talking about Black men right now, is that my son or my nephews or someone else that I care about, he's giving immunity to police officers. We see this, we know this is going to happen. Black people are 2 to 3 times more likely to be killed by law enforcement. And I know Dr. Smiley writes about that quite a bit. So I'm preaching to the choir here. Is that something happens in a community, Baltimore, D.C., my home city, Philadelphia, and Black folks will not have time for it. And then someone like Donald Trump sends the U.S. military in, and then we're going to have a real problem on our hands. And I do not want to see that. But Donald Trump is telling you that's what's going to happen. And listen, as an academic, I'm not having it either. So I think we have to be really careful when we talk to Black men and listen, this is what's going to happen. And I know we keep talking about law enforcement, but the reality is that it will make it very easy for Black folks to continue to be shot and brutalized in a Trump administration. And one other thing is, the last point I made about authoritarianism, which I've read a lot about. A lot of Americans don't have any idea. They've heard about Hitler, Mussolini, and Pinochet, and some of these other dictators. But Americans really don't understand what that is like to live under that kind of regime. And if we are not very careful in a couple of weeks, we will find out in a very short period of time.
Yeah, when we come forward, I want to talk about connecting those dots, because that's the conversation I've been having with voters, those I was engaged with in Phoenix and those that I'm engaging with here in Nevada, is I don't think people understood the significant losses we suffered or would suffer with the loss of the election that Hillary Clinton lost. We sit here with a 6-3 majority court. I don't think people were necessarily thinking. I know they weren't thinking about the courts. And I don't know how we get people to make all of those connections to the Department of Justice and the elimination of consent decrees and the whole civil rights division. The elimination, you both, I'm sure, care a whole lot about this. The elimination of the Department of Education is one of the issues that's being pushed by this Project 2025 and those that are advising Donald Trump. So when we come forward, we're going to talk more about how do we get people to connect the dots about how consequential this election really is. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
To help combat climate change, LADWP is helping neighborhoods have better access to electric vehicles by awarding nearly $130 million in EV rebates to customers just like you. From big savings on used EVs to building new charging plazas, LADWP is charging ahead to help all Angelenos experience the benefits of EVs. Get rebates of up to $4,000 for a used EV and $1,750 for a charger. Learn more at ladwp.com/EV. That's ladwp.com/EV. With reported hate crimes rising in recent years, California has responded through outreach efforts across state government and in collaboration with community-based organizations for the launch of CA versus Hate. This non-emergency, multilingual hate crime and incident reporting hotline provides an anonymous reporting option for victims and witnesses of hate acts, reported in 15 different languages through the online portal and in over 200 languages when calling the hotline. Report anonymously by calling 833-866-4283, Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. or online at any time at cavshate.org. Hey, LA residents, it's planting season and the perfect time to get shade trees growing around your home. LADWP and City Plants are giving every resident up to 7 free trees. That's right, 7 free trees delivered right to your door. Trees are great for the environment, help improve air quality, and can help you save on your bill when you use less air conditioning to stay cool indoors. Learn more at ladwp.com/free trees. That's ladwp.com/free trees.
We're not just a thermometer recording and broadcasting popular opinion. We aim to be a thermostat, transforming the conversation about climate justice in our community. This is KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminds you, when we fight, we win. The Youth Justice Coalition is challenging America's addiction to incarceration and discrimination. YJC works to dismantle policies leading to mass incarceration, law enforcement violence, and the school-to-prison pipeline. Their approach? Transformative justice, community intervention, free LA high school, legal defense, and system monitoring. YJC promotes safety without relying on prisons. Their goal? Prevent system contact and help people exit the system through direct action, advocacy, and education. Want to get involved or need help? Call 323-235-4243. That's 323-235-4243. Join YJC in creating change. When we fight, we win. KBLA Talk 1580, your voice for justice. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
We are back, and I am talking to Calvin John Smiley and Professor Larry Walker. Both of them are professors, so we got some smart people in the house today. In hour two, I'm going to be talking to the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. His name is Congressmember Stephen Horsford, and I am in his district. I'm in Las Vegas on a 7-state battleground tour. I'm talking to voters in these battleground states, got out of my California bubble. Professor Walker, glad I did because you're right. Political insiders are all tuned in to this election, but I've talked to voters who are like, I don't know a whole lot about Kamala Harris. I don't know who I'm voting for yet. I haven't made up my mind. So the issues that seem to be motivating us and perhaps those on cable news aren't necessarily, resonating with everyday voters, people, who are going about their lives. And we're getting near in the hour. It's 21 days away from what some say the most consequential election of this era. When do people start really paying attention?
Usually it's about this time, Areva. So, folks are not, besides them being bombarded with text messages and, various commercials and seeing it's everywhere. It's saturating the ecosystem. So I don't know how people are not really don't see what's going on. But listen, everyone's got, other things that they're engaged in. But like I tell you, if you're not a part of the top 1%, you better be engaged. Because listen, let's go back to Project 2025. And I want to make a connection to another blueprint, the contract with America. Because it's essentially a precursor to what we see now. That document and this current Project 2025 document, one fundamentally change the way government operates in a bad way. And this will completely change every single aspect of your life. And like I said, if you're not among the top 1%, you're going to feel the pain. And I worry, Areva, that, like I said, I talk to a lot of voters too, but, brothers and, sisters and everyone else. And I do worry that folks don't see the train that's coming down the track in the middle of the night, and they're standing on the tracks. And like I said, because my policy work, I understand what this will look like. And not 3 years from now, within the first 3 to 4 months, people in this country at the beginning of 2025 will see their fundamental lives change and their rights be eroded. So it's important for folks to get engaged. And like I say, people like you and I and Dr. Smiley, we need to continue to talk to folks. And I know Dr. Smiley, like I said, it's not just the domestic issues, but we have to have this conversation about these international issues. But Areva, I think your point about who makes the call on issues like the conflict in Israel, I think that's important from a constitutional standpoint. But I think Dr. Smiley's point about fundamental from a moral standpoint, that we need to continue to have these conversations in a healthy democracy.
Yeah, Dr. Smiley, I'm also worried about those voters, and there are lots of them, that vote against their own interests. Because clearly, if people were voting for their own interests, so many people would not be in office. Like Mitch McConnell, take Kentucky, for example. Kentucky is a state that is just at the bottom of so many metrics in terms of health care, child care. The list goes on and on. But Mitch McConnell has had a long history of representing Kentucky. And there are poor people now. There are people who will be substantially impacted. Immigrants, let's take that population. Trump is talking mass deportation. Economists say it will destabilize our economy. It will lead to trillions of dollars of debt. I mean, they said it'll be devastating. But there are immigrants who I have met on this, campaign trail who say they are supporting Donald Trump. Gay people. I'm sure you both saw the big march on Saturday in Washington of the evangelicals who were praying, people saying, I'm afraid that Democrats win. My little son goes to school, a boy. He's going to come home a girl. And, if Donald Trump isn't elected, it's going to be the end of the world as we know. I mean, but there are lots of gay people that support Donald Trump. There are lots of immigrants that support Donald Trump. So, what is it about this? Help us understand the psychology of that.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring up the word psychology, Areva, because if you go back to W.E.B. Du Bois's work, he had a term or a phrase called the psychological wage of whiteness, which speaks to this thing. How can poor white people vote for rich white plantation owners or rich white, Jim Crow era capitalists that clearly don't have their interests? And that's because they've been able to psychologically make them believe that race was their most important issue for them. So in this particular example, them being white, not necessarily worrying about their gender or their class or their disability or whatever, made them better than the other groups. And so we can expand that kind of idea of psychological wage of whiteness to these other issues. So someone might be gay, but that might not be their entire identity. And so they're like, yeah, I can deal with that because maybe I already have a class privilege, or maybe I'm an immigrant, but I'm one of those quote unquote good immigrants, and therefore I'm distinguished from the bad immigrants that come here. And so I think what's really important here is to think through, in terms of going back to what I was saying earlier, the burden is on the Democratic Party to really try to capture the vote of young Black men, of young folks, of other folks. And I agree with Dr. Walker. I agree with you that we all know how bad it is going to be under a Donald Trump regime. But one thing, and as a critical scholar, I always want us to make sure is that it's not honey and roses under the Democrats, right? I just looked it up while we were on break. More people have been killed by the police in the last 3 years than in the previous 4 years because the numbers just keep going up. So the Democrats haven't really done much to address police-involved shootings and violence. We know that Gaza is not necessarily a single voter issue when we think about its connection to environmentalism, or when we think about the type of training that our local police here in the United States receive from the IDF, which then in turn, the money that we give to them is used to then train US police to then, hurt Black people in America. So people are voting in this kind of, or want to see. I think the biggest thing, and then I'll end here, is I think people really want to vote for Harris. They want to vote for Harris Walls. They want to vote for Democrats. They just want to hear. They want to hear it in the rhetoric. They don't want to hear Israel has the right to defend itself as we're watching people being burned to death in hospitals. Right? That is a very big turnoff. And so I think in these last couple days. I just want to say in these last couple of days, I really just want to hear the Democrats punch the important issues that young folks have been, decrying for the last year.
And I hear you on that. And I am no apologist for the Democratic Party or the DNC, the racism. I mean, we are not suggesting that liberal Democrats are not as racist as, conservative Republicans. Racism is rampant in our institutions, in our country. And I was just having a conversation about, the DNC with a good friend of mine, and he was at a meeting, and there was so few Black people at this meeting. Even the white people were like, oh my God, where are the Black people? So no, we got so much work to do and so many issues. And I don't know. I hear what you're saying about you just wish they would say Israel doesn't have a right to defend themselves. And then the minute they don't say that, then you got the Jewish community going crazy.
The Zionist community. I think we should be very clear. The Zionist community, because we saw even today. We saw today lots of Jewish folks and Jewish allies, in the streets protesting what was happening. But I do think we're probably all going to need a chiropractor after this conversation tonight.
Yeah, no, it's complex. It's complicated, I guess folks will say. It's complicated. because you say X and then the Y group, jumps all down your throat. Kamala Harris doesn't do enough interviews with black media. The black folks are mad. She does too many interviews with black media. The white media says, why is she focusing on these little black media outlets? I mean, so let's just say everybody that has the courage to step up and accept the call to serve deserves a lot of credit and a lot of support, because this is not for the faint of heart. All right, guys, I don't know if you guys gave me what I need tomorrow to go into this barbershop and talk to these black men, but I'm going to try my best. I'm going to try not to be confused, Robert, or angry. I'm going to just try to listen and try to help them understand what I see in my view of the world as a mother of a black son, a woman married to a black man. So I love black men too. Uh, I'll let y'all know how it goes. That's all I can say. I'll let you know how it goes. What we got for more news right here. Some important stories coming up on Las Vegas and Nevada. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580. Thanks, guys.
Thank
All right,
you.
take care. All right, guys.
See you next time. Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.